Hi, this is John Ryan with the Team Handball News Podcast, and joining me is Colton Strickler with the Colorado XOs Rugby Club. We had a great part one where I found out a lot more about the XO program, gave me some ideas on and maybe some things handball can do. I said I know a little bit about rugby enough to be dangerous. I don't know where Colton feels at this point, but he's got a lot of rugby questions. I'm going to let him fire away, and maybe this will be redundant to some folks that already know handball, but maybe my answers will be informative from a standpoint of some of the things that we could do to further develop handball in the U.S. So, Colton, fire away.
Okay. Like you said, you knew a lot of enough about rugby to be dangerous. I don't know hardly anything about handball. What I knew is, first thing that came to my mind when I saw your message come through is, didn't Jake Plummer get super into handball? But isn't that a different type of handball?
Yeah.
That's not the same.
Yeah, I've commented on that before, especially when Tebow would have been a great handball player.
Yeah.
And he's left-handed, which is also very important on one side of the court. But Plummer plays the wall version of handball, and that's probably so. In the U.S., it's officially called team handball.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of use both, because Europeans even get mad that we call it team handball instead of handball, but they don't understand that there's the handball version of racquetball, if you will, that's more well known, more people play it, and I've spent my entire life explaining, no, I don't play that handball. I play team handball. It's like water polo without the water, lacrosse without sticks, yada, yada, yada. Jake Plummer is a great wall handball player.
Okay.
Probably could have been a good team handball player.
I would think so, right? He can move around a little bit. He could throw that thing. That sounds like a thing that exists in rugby. Like, it's called Major League Rugby here, but it's actually rugby union. But we just call the, organization the league, and people don't like that. Should be.
Oh, I never even thought about that, because you got rugby union and rugby league.
Exactly. They don't play. Rugby league's not really popular in the United States. Rugby union is, but
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
But that probably sails over the head of anyone that's not a rugby person.
Oh yeah, they don't know that.
Yeah,
that's okay.
But it's a side point. I remember watching. France had one team in the professional rugby league that played in with all the teams in England. I'm like, well, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, it is a little different. Like, it's just different enough that you're like, wait, what? This is not what I'm used to.
That they're counting the number of times they got to carry the ball, and in some ways, I actually like it better, but it's just not as big a thing. But we're not going to go into a rugby union dissertation.
No. Exactly.
But for sure, the semantics of handball versus team handball have been a huge problem for our sport, and there's no simple solution to if we just started calling ourselves handball, that would be an issue with the wall handball people. So
exactly, and you don't want to make everybody mad, right? So that was my first question. The other ones, I have a lot of just basic ones, and these are questions when I try to tell people about rugby, this is what a lot of people ask me, but it's just how do you watch it? If I wanted to watch handball this weekend, how do I do that?
Well, you're going to have dozens of opportunities to watch it during the Olympics.
Yes.
And I would really encourage you to take it out, to watch it. You kind of watch it maybe like you watch basketball. I mean, you follow the ball and you see what's going on. But if you become a little bit more educated, watch the spacing of the players. You talked a little bit about how the basketball players understand spacing and cutting and that sort of thing. Handball is very similar to that. Watch how the players space themselves. Watch how they prepare themselves to catch the ball in order to shoot. And right now I'm talking more about the set offenses, if you will.
Okay.
You can kind of see the plays that are run.
Yeah.
Watch what the defense does.
Okay.
And how they guard.
Yeah.
Watch what the wings do. How they kind of hang out in the corner like John Paxson
Yeah.
Basketball, they're the guys that need to be able ready to shoot when the time comes.
Okay.
Enjoy the fast breaks. I think handball fast breaks are fantastic. They're more entertaining than basketball. And watch the goalies. Watch what the goalies do. And that's probably one of the things that is hard for people to adjust to is that, how many times a goalkeeper in handball fails.
Yeah.
All the goaltending sports there are, soccer, hockey, field hockey, whatever, nobody fails as many times as a handball goalie.
Okay.
Nobody succeeds as many times as well, too, because they get more opportunities. But I think that's one of the things that if you look at all the sports that have goalies, it's the closest thing to a fair contest between the shooter and the goal. It's not like a miracle, like you're watching soccer and yay, we scored a goal and we're going to win 1-0 now. It's more of a constant battle, if you will.
Right. John, that was a great answer to my question, but I was trying to ask, like, what channel is it on?
So it'll be on NBC, one of the NBC networks.
Yeah.
On my website, I'll be publishing a schedule of where they're going to be on regular TV, if you will.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting to see what they do because a lot of the games are going to be in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah, that's going to be the same, obviously, with the rugby stuff.
Right. So you don't know, and it'll be like on the NBC Sports Network from 3 to 4:30 in the morning. Okay. Or maybe they'll show it tape delay, and I'm hoping they show it tape delay so people like you can discover the sport.
Yeah.
Less likely to do that in the middle of the night.
For sure. Every
single game will be web streamed too.
Okay.
You can watch every single match.
When I was telling my friends I was coming to do this podcast, they're like, "Oh, I love watching handball in the Olympics." So they have at least, seen it in the Olympics before. Some other questions I had is like, what country does it the best? So like, just based on my very small amount of research, it sounds like kind of like soccer. Like is there like a Champions League of like handball too, or like what? Tell me about, I guess, some of like the high level competitions and what country does it best.
So it mirrors very much how rugby is done in Europe.
Okay.
So each nation has a national league, and then they also have a Champions League. They used to call it the Heineken Cup in rugby. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, I think
now.
It still is. The sponsors adjust, but I think it is still Heineken actually.
Yeah, so they have a Champions League, and that features the top team from most of the top leagues. There's like controversy as to which teams get in. There's wild cards. So they have that league competition that takes place at the same time as the national leagues are going on. So right now the Champions Leagues is going to be played on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And those matches are all web streamed, and those are the top clubs in Europe. And then the national competitions are played on the weekends.
Okay.
And they also have a second tier European competition called the European League, and they play on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So it's very, very similar to how rugby is set up. And then in your national league, if you finish first, you're guaranteed in. And then maybe if you finish second, you'll get the second, you'll get a spot in the Champions League. And then they have like third, fourth, and fifth. You'll be in the European League.
Okay.
So very similar to rugby.
Who is the best player? Or I guess who is your favorite player?
Well, those are different questions.
Okay, we'll answer both of them if you wouldn't mind. So if I'm going on YouTube and I want to watch this, like, who should I look up? Who would you recommend?
So the greatest player of all time, the GOAT of handball, is a French player named Nikola Karabatic.
Okay.
Is of Croatian and Serbian descent. His dad moved to France. He is getting a little long in the tooth, though. He's 37. Okay. He's still pretty good. But he's not as good as he was 10 years ago. He's won so many titles, both in the national team level and the club level.
How do you spell his last name? I'm trying to look him up right now so I can.
Karabatic, Kara.
Okay, I got it. I
Okay.
just got to get close enough and then
Yeah.
Google. Okay.
So he's a good defender too.
Good fella. He kind of looks like
Yeah.
Jim from The Office a little bit.
Maybe. So he's still pretty good. He's been battling injuries though. So there's a little bit of question in my mind whether it's, like when you're older and you get an injury, people think you've lost it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the case with him. He's still good, but not as good as he used to be.
Okay.
There's a Danish player who's the best offensive player probably now, named Mikkel Hansen. And he's a really good offensive player, but he hides out on the wing or subs out on defense.
Oh, he's like Carmelo Anthony then. He just scores the baskets and then he checks out for the stuff he doesn't want to do.
Well, the thing is in handball, substitution's like hockey. So you can literally check out.
Lines. Okay.
So he checks out when it's possible to check out. You can't always do it based on the fast break transition.
Yeah.
And when he can't, they throw him down on the wing because he just doesn't play defense very well. I don't know if it's an attitude or he's just not the nose to the grindstone guy, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's a good player. And then Sander Sagerson from Norway is also a great player. And I'd say he's the up and coming next. He's not quite as good offensively as Hansen, but he's close. And he's a lot younger. He also plays good defense.
Okay. I got all these guys saved in my browser now, so I can check them out when I have some time later.
Yeah. So they'll be, and for the Olympics, there'll be a round robin competition. And then the top 4 teams from each group advance to quarterfinals. And then, it's a knockout tournament from then on. So
cool.
Lots of great handball to watch. And you got the women's handball and the men's handball alternating every day too.
Okay. Yeah. So we have a steady helping of handball. I like it. I'll need something else to watch.
Every single day.
I like it.
For the first 10 days, it'll be 6 matches a day.
Oh,
I mean, talk about not being able to watch everything. That's impossible.
Once every 4 years, though, you could do it. I believe in you.
Yeah.
I'll mix it into the schedule for sure. I like that. I'm trying to think some of the other ones I had. I think I have 2 more, and then I'll probably think of some other ones. So I'll probably just squeeze them in different places. So the first one is you're in the Springs. I'm in Denver. Where, if I wanted to go watch some handball, where would I do that? I would drive to the Springs. I would give it a shot. I'm interested now.
Yeah. So handball is not nearly as well developed in the U.S. as rugby is.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you ever want to, Bruce McLean, you ever listen to that guy?
No. I don't
he
listen
used to
to
be
a lot
on
of shows, to be quite honest.
He used to have a regular podcast. He's kind of a bull in a china shop, but I did an interview with him on college rugby. He's a coach at Ithaca.
I saw that when I was looking on your site for it.
And we talked a little bit about how, rugby's everywhere,
mm-hmm.
At all levels, but handball is far less developed. There is a new club starting up in Denver, and they're trying to get some traction, and I'll put a link on the podcast for this.
Okay.
So they're trying to start a new club. They'd love to have new players, somebody looking for something different to do and to get involved, kind of, and much lower level than the Denver XOs.
Yeah.
More recreational. I'm sure they've got some expats in Denver that are probably going to play on it and put them into a good quality position. And then in the Springs, it's pretty much just the Air Force Academy as a club team. And they might have a tournament this year that people could go to. Maybe the new Denver club will come down and play some games against it.
I would go check that out. That sounds cool.
But there's on USA's website, they have a listing of the different clubs and the contact information. So wherever people are, you can check it out. I'm a part of a working group trying to build up college rugby, because I think that's the sweet spot for development in the U.S. I know you played high school rugby.
Yeah.
But if I know my rugby history fairly well, it started out mostly in colleges.
Yeah.
But it gradually started to work its way down to high school. And I for one, I think that handball needs to follow the same pattern I'm against high school handball, if you will, but it's so tough to break in, and if you don't have a pathway to go to college and play it.
Yeah,
But it's a long-standing debate about how to best develop the sport of handball in the U.S.
for sure.
And to me, and I know rugby has had its problems, but I look at what rugby has accomplished in the last 25, 30 years, and
Yeah,
maybe you guys went bankrupt and your federation went bankrupt and you've had different problems. You guys are like a model for
right.
handball, though.
See, that's funny to hear you say that, just because, like you were saying on the last episode, yeah, just everybody has, ideas of how they would do things better, or agree with this, disagree with that, but it's just like it's refreshing to hear that, almost, that
Well,
this,
and here's a point that I have made too. It's like everybody transfers at some point from another sport.
yeah,
For rugby, even still, maybe they do that transition in high school now a lot more than it used to be.
right,
And you guys are modeling, post college transfer.
yeah.
But I would still say that maybe I'm wrong, that most of the transfer is still taking place in college, but I could be wrong for rugby.
That's a good question, to be honest. That's worth looking into. That's something I'm honestly not too familiar with, but I know just across the board, it seems like across the country, there's been a grassroots initiative, like get the ball in the kids' hands when they're 5 or 7, or even, into middle school, so that you have a leg up before you get to high school, before you get to college.
Yeah.
And then if you want to take it serious before you get to, international 7th Circuit or MLR or whatever.
Well, it's the type of athlete that's available quality wise.
Yeah.
I'll look at my athleticism. I was not good enough to play Division I basketball.
Yeah.
But the handball was better suited to me. But you could not have gotten me to play handball in high school.
Yeah.
Maybe you could have shown it to me, but
Yeah.
there is no way I would have given it up to focus on that instead of basketball, until I said, like, okay, my basketball is done because I'm going to a big college. I could have gone to a small college and played.
Exactly.
But, and the same aspect with you're going to get people to drop out of sports at different ages.
Yep.
And the big break points, I think, are age 22, 23,
Yep.
and age 18, 19.
Right.
And the quality of athlete that's dropping out is going to be a little bit higher, but then you got that 4-year difference.
Right.
You take a look at some of your Colorado XOs. Imagine if they had started playing rugby at 18 and 19 instead of 22, 23.
But you made a good point, and it's something I've talked about on other podcasts, and it's something that's been verbalized to me by the rugby department. Is, you're right. The best rugby player in high school is probably also going to be the best football player, the best wrestler, the best basketball player. And even like you're talking about, the more the opportunities exist in rugby than handball, where, there's going to be way more opportunities in football and baseball and basketball and wrestling. So you had essentially, like, what the kind of the model is that has been in the United States for the last few years is, you just have to hope that you introduce them to rugby early enough that they like it. They go to college and they wrestle for 4 or 5 years. And then when that's over, they're like, I want to play rugby again because I can't wrestle anymore. And that's not really a strategy, right? Like, hope is not a strategy. So building, like you said, building these new opportunities and getting, it's great now that the college athletics and different schools are getting, D1 rugby programs where they have scholarship money to offer them, and all that good stuff, that proving that there is a pathway, and you can, like rugby, and take it far enough to do cool things, and, hopefully eventually make a good solid living is a key.
Yeah. Well, to me, when you're looking at what you're going to do with your high school program, and how much you're going to invest in it. If you try and take high school athletes and get them to 100% focus, you're not going to get the best athletes. It's going to take a lot of effort to
Right.
build up the skills of those players. And from my perspective, it's only a matter of time till somebody that's a better athlete starts playing the same sport, and they're eventually going to get better than that guy.
Yeah.
It depends. It's how good, what level are you going to get? And you're going to find diamonds in the rough,
Exactly.
if you will, as well. So I like the concept of introduction.
Yeah.
And to me, the more people we could introduce to handball to get it in the back of their mind, when the dream of a Division I scholarship fades, they're going like, I was actually pretty damn good at this handball game. I could probably be on a national team. I'm
I had
actually
fun.
better suited for this.
Yeah, I had fun at practice. I had fun in the games. Like
Yeah.
I met some cool people, all that stuff comes into play.
The more people that you get that done with, the better you are for that. So it's a hope strategy,
Yeah.
but if you do that with 100 people, you're gonna get some of those guys, because right now with handball, we're in a position of trying to convince people like, hey, you should play this. This is a really good game. When I coached at the Air Force Academy, I would go to, they used to have basketball tryouts.
Yeah.
And they pretty much already had their roster already. And I would say to guys, this was me. I was you 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I've gone to the world championships. I've represented my country. I was a great high school basketball player, but I was actually better suited for handball.
Yeah.
Or, that might be your path as well.
Yeah.
And so I think the more people you have ready to go, to jump right into it at the club level, and to have good clubs, that it's not just a bunch of guys, goofing off. It's an organized thing. Maybe it's not a Division I sport, but it's an organized club that
it's
is
serious
meaningful.
enough to, you're not just wasting your time, going to this. I totally get where you're coming from with that. And I guess that kind of leads in, you mentioned some things that lead into my last question I had for you. So when I was doing the research on the Jay Cutler thing, and I saw that the handball community was kind of mad, and it looked like it was kind of good for handball though, right? Like it got into the press and everyone's talking about it. I see like they're talking about it on ESPN. Dominique Foxworth, another guy that played corner for the Broncos, he said that you could sub him out for LeBron. And during my digging, my very brief digging, I found this thing that there was a video of 19 old NFL guys that were playing handball in Europe or something like that.
Yeah.
I only saw a little 10-minute video. So what happened with that?
So, and I actually interviewed the guy that leads it. I think his name is Gary Bernard.
Okay.
He was a tight end for the Tennessee Titans.
Okay.
Got injured. He had a pretty decent career, and they've started that program, American Football Without Borders. Okay. And so they go to different countries, and their primary goal is to teach football to kids in other countries. So they do some clinics and stuff. And when they visited Hungary, they said, hey, you guys, why don't you come play handball? So it was kind of they showed them some football drills, and the pro handball players showed them some handball, and they played a match with against their second team. And it was all for good fun. And my interview with him, it was a fun interview. Great guy. And real appreciation for handball now.
Yeah. I feel like that was a misleading article I read. It was an SB Nation or something, because it said these 19 football players were training with the Hungary or whatever you said that. So I got the wrong idea, but that is cool. I'm sure that was nice to see.
And there was a longer video. It'd be if the Broncos came to the XOs, you guys would show them some line outs and stuff.
Okay,
and then
I get it.
And maybe, play a little match, just to get a taste of it.
Play some touch or something like that. That's interesting. So what was the reaction like? Why did I can almost I feel like I can predict what people said when Jay Cutler went on Part of My Take and said all this stuff, because I feel like the same thing's been said about this whole XO program a million times before. What were people upset about? Were they just it's, and I'm sure it is just more intricacies than meets the eye, and Jay Cutler wouldn't pick that up quick enough, or what was that all about?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that when they see handball at the Olympics, they get the impression that it's, maybe they played it in gym class, and they think that over in Europe, it's kind of like what they do in gym class, maybe a little bit more organized,
Yeah.
and that, people will say, we could just take any 15 NBA players and we could go win a gold medal. And it's not the issue of transfer, it's how long is it going to take? How long, the questions I asked you in part one. And the NBA has the greatest athletes.
For sure.
I think that there's what?
I said for sure. Yeah, they can run forever.
Yeah. And nothing against other sports, but you can just tell LeBron would be a tremendous handball player if he played it. But you can't just take somebody in 6 months and think that they're just going to run roughshod over professional athletes that have been playing a sport their entire lives.
Yeah.
It'd be like, somebody saying, you give me the top 20 NFL players and we're going to go win rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that? If Jay Cutler said like, oh, we can go win the Rugby World Cup, we go kick the Springboks and in England's the All Blacks ass,
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, no, that would make me mad. What was the time frame that Jay Cutler put on that? Do you remember?
So what happens in that? And that's where it becomes kind of a theoretical debate. Is it a month? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 6 months? Is it a year, 2 years? Is it 3 years? Oh, okay. I'm not going to get LeBron. So I'm going to get, somebody that maybe didn't make the NBA. So maybe he's not quite LeBron. He's a good athlete. Maybe somebody that the XO program would be interested in. Yeah. So you get all of these different possibilities in terms of, okay, your level of athlete just has gone down a lot. Okay. You're going to train them a little bit longer now because it's going to take longer. How long? Oh, how are you going to pay for all of these guys to get trained? These are guys that could go play basketball in Europe for 6 figures.
Right.
So when you start to peel away the onion, for what people want to do.
Yeah, the logistical challenges. Yeah.
And that's why it was interesting to see, because you guys actually have a strategy for taking those, post-collegiate guys. And people will watch the Olympics. They'll see, I don't know, they'll see Denmark's team, or they'll see, Portugal's team, and they'll go like, I could take the Boise State University men's basketball team, and they're as good as athletes as these guys. To which I say, you know what? I think some of these guys are as good as athletes as Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
What do you think? MVP? You think, some of these guys playing a sport they've been playing their entire lives are now going to get schooled by you after a 6-month training program or a 2-month training program or whatever.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. All right. Stop.
I totally agree.
Just stop. You're getting me angry because I know I'm about ready to get bombarded with all these articles and tweets, and it's great publicity for the sport. It really is. But it's just not that simple. Right. Otherwise, we'd already have a Rugby World Cup to our belt, wouldn't we?
You're right. Yep. I totally get it, man. Like I said, I lived it with this whole XO thing, like when this was announced and when it picked up steam, and a lot of people interpreted the program as that. And that's just not the impression that I've got. Like they never, the whole, like the way that it was described in what they've said and what they've, put on record in the statement is like, they want to eventually help the United States win the World Cup. And they think that introducing better athletes is going to help them do that. And like, it's probably right, but it's not going to be in 2 years. It's not going to be, it's going to take a while, but I feel like this is not, and a lot of people have said like, well, this isn't the answer. I'm like, you're right. It's not the answer to the question, but it is a answer to the question. Like there's different ways to do it. And when you combine them all, that might be, what gets them over the hump. So.
Yeah. And I guess the equivalent would be if you guys were saying, well, not only are we going to, our XOs are soon going to be better than all the MLR clubs.
Yeah.
And then the U.S. Eagles roster is going to be, is going to be the XO team.
20. Yeah, exactly. 20 XO.
You guys have more realistic expectation. You still have high but achievable goals, I think.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some time, but you're going to find some athletes.
Right. And like you said, it's, they brought in 30, 35 players this year, and 6 of them have made it to MLR in the first year. So that's not everybody, but that's a good percentage, right? That's a decent fraction of the players on the team. And so if you do that ideally for 5 years, then you have 30 guys that are playing pro rugby that didn't play rugby before.
And the expectation is an MLR contract, which is a semi-professional league, maybe getting a little bit more professional with all the foreigners coming in.
Yeah, it's working its way up a little bit.
But it's not the same as like saying this is going to be the Eagles. You know, so and let's face it, the Eagles are still, a step down from the top teams in the world.
Right. Yeah.
And the MLR is a step down from the top 14 and the Premier Rugby League.
Yeah, Premiership and all that good stuff. You're not wrong. But the ideally, and even like the MLR, mission is if you do this for, you just keep doing it, right? You just keep doing it. And in 25 years, if you look like the MLS, that's a good thing. And then if in 25 more years, you look like the NFL, that's a good thing, right? That's the idea there.
This reminded me of a question I was going to ask you in terms of player positions.
Mm-hmm.
This is where my rugby knowledge might get me in trouble. But I look at transfer, and I see that as more of a forward success story than a back success story. Because I look at the skill set that you've got to have to be a good back, and to throwing a rugby ball, that is not something that you just go out and do. And
to throw, and you're right. You'd be right in saying that. I would, off the top of my head, I think, and if I had a guess, I think there's only been one back that's been signed, like from the XO team. Like then he plays fullback, which is arguably, I'm not going to say like the easiest back, but probably one of the easier positions to play in the back, because it's kind of like free safety punt returner, right? You insert yourself into the lines when you're on offense. So your responsibilities and the decisions you have to make aren't nearly as much as, I guess, if you're playing like scrum half, right? And you're controlling the pace of play. But I think, 5 of the 6 guys that have been signed have all been forwards.
Yeah. So and for handball, we get into the same sort of thing. There's different positions in handball. Basically you got your goalkeeper. God help anybody that wants to transition to be a goalkeeper. That's a position that takes years to learn. Years. You might have good reactions and skills, but that is something that you just have to play, face thousands and thousands of shots from good scores. So impossible almost to talent transfer, I think. And then, in terms of offensive players, you've got 5 guys from wing to, the 3 backcourt players in the other wing. And then you have a player that's I call it circle runner. It's been, also called pivot player with your back to the basket. And that's the easiest position to transfer, because you're not passing the ball much to other people. You're receiving the ball, you're posting up kind of like a basketball center a little bit. But that position in the wings are a little bit easier to learn, I think, because there's less interaction with the other players. The other aspect, and this, so I guess I'm saying, I think different positions,
more tailor-made for the crossover piece.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure. And then different aspects of the game. Defense in handball and defense in basketball, very similar in concept, except, and I love this the first time I play, I can hit the guy. It's physical, and I can grab a guy instead of, him, if I can keep in front of him,
Right.
So in rugby, is it the same way? Is the defensive aspect of rugby fairly quick for people to pick up, but the offensive flow of the ball and the timing for those passes, is that much harder?
Yeah, I think what I've gathered just from talking to people and getting opinions on players this year was you're right. They can make a tackle. That's not new to them, but making 5 tackles in a row, that's new, right? Like tackling somebody, getting up and being like, oh my goodness, I got to tackle this guy again. Like, where's my help at? That's new. And then a lot of the guys in here that have had success are defensive guys. And it's like, they love getting to carry the ball. They haven't got to carry the ball since they were in 7th grade. So like getting to run and score and all that good stuff, like they like doing that. And I guess like the offensive, you're right. The flow of the game is, I guess, a little bit harder because like one of the first things for me when I started to play rugby is like, it was super hard. It was a really hard adjustment to not run out of bounds or like to take outside lines. If like I'm on like a breakaway and I have to beat 1 or 2 guys, like it was hard for my brain to know, don't run outside, because if I run out of bounds, it's a turnover. I have to just be like, just kind of try to cut back in or run straight. And if you get tackled, so what? Like, it's okay. So there's a lot of that, running out of bounds, and there's a lot of not passing because it's not in your brain yet. Ball security, there was a very interesting, again, going back to part of my take, I don't really listen to the show anymore as much as I once did, but he had Lane Kiffin on, obviously offensive coordinator all throughout college football, and PFT commenter, who's a big rugby guy. I interviewed him when I worked for MLR. He asked Lane Kiffin if there was any place in football for like a rugby play, like say it's a desperation, the clock's running out. Like, why don't you practice like a back line, like run switches and run dummy lines and stuff like, because it would work totally. And Lane Kiffin gave a great answer. And that's because like possession of the football is so important in football, but it's not really like that big of a deal in rugby. So I think like with that, it's ingrained in football players and running backs and receivers, like just don't let go of the ball, but you need to be successful.
Well, and I've heard people, when they talk about rugby, they always bring up the Cal Berkeley play, at the end of the game, where it was sort of kind of like a rugby.
Yeah.
Because again, possession, they had to score.
Yeah,
they had to do the crazy, passes like that.
Yeah.
The equivalent of like not running out of bounds maybe in handball is 3 steps.
Yeah, I was seeing that. So what do you have to do? You have to pass, shoot, or dribble? And do you just dribble like a basketball?
You dribble kind of like a basketball, but you don't dribble as much because it's a little bit harder ball to dribble, and they call palming a lot closer.
Okay.
But you do dribble, obviously. But the thing is you get 3 steps instead of 2 steps in handball. So the hardest thing for a basketball convert is to get rid of the totally ingrained, I get 2 steps after my last dribble or after I catch the ball. No, you get 3, and you want to use all 3. And when you're playing defense, you got to be ready for somebody using all 3. So that's
to stop somebody when you're expecting them to, take 2 steps and then make a decision. Yeah, I would imagine that would.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing for a convert. It's one of those little things. If you've been playing it that way your whole life, it's nothing, but it's kind of like going out of bounds, like, oh, I better stay in bounds. I don't want to go out of bounds. Or I want to grab this guy and throw him out of bounds. That was the sort of questions I was asking the first time I saw rugby. And the funniest thing too, I was traveling with a French guy, and we were watching an American football game because we were in the States, and he's like going, when do they run out of bounds?
Yeah. And that was one of the hardest things even for me to learn up until recently. Like I've said, I've been into rugby for 11 years now, and like understanding the kicking part, which I know you said like that took me so long to figure it out, but it was, and once you kind of accept the fact, like the possession isn't really what's important. It's like the territory is more important. So like if you don't want to play with the ball super deep in your own territory, because if you make one single little tiny mistake, like they're probably going to get the ball back and score on you. So once you kind of wrap your head around that, it becomes a lot easier to understand.
Yeah. That was that. And that's the PFT commenter was right. He's wrong about handball a lot, but he was right about the possession game, that American football is. And,
it was cool. I was just glad to hear him ask somebody that's like, considered one of the great offensive minds in college football, like, why don't you do this? Because it's something I've wondered. and I coach little league football myself, and I've thought about, but you just can't. Just way too important to mess around and fumble the ball and give it back to somebody.
Hey, let's, we can still got questions that come to mind. You can still ask them, but let's transition a little bit to talk.
I think that was all the questions I had, so we can jump into some MLR stuff.
Let's talk about the MLR, Major League Rugby. And for one, I am fascinated with any of the new leagues that are out there. Mm-hmm. I found out that the PLL, Professional Lacrosse League, has come to Colorado Springs. So I might even go down to
check
our new soccer stadium and check that out. And MLR, I guess this is its third season now. And
yeah, well, kind of. This is the fourth one. The third one was kind of ravaged by COVID. They got in 5 matches, and so this is the third full season. So
it's always talked about. People bring up the possibility of a pro handball league. Mm-hmm. And some of our discussion here supported the idea behind a pro rugby league and how that has helped the development of the game, both at the national level and then just overall. You got all these games on TV. People in college now they see a pathway to the pros, and all that being said, it's so damn tough to start a new professional league. Yeah. And I got dozens of questions. Let me go. I look at the MLR and kind of the same question we had at the XOs. Mm-hmm. How is it financed?
Okay.
And maybe I'm mistaken here. And this is the point I've brought up to handball people is I get the impression that these rugby clubs are being financed by guys that love rugby that have become multimillionaires, not billionaires, but they've got multiple 6 zeros, and they've got money to spend, and they love rugby, and they're willing to make this work.
You would be correct. So I don't know how familiar you are with like the layout of the league. And this is, again, I'm not an expert on this at all, but based on my understanding, like it's built exactly like Major League Soccer is, where the league technically owns the teams, and then the people that run the franchises own shares in the league. So like the guy that owns the big new owner, like I think he's probably the only billionaire in MLR.
The Giltini guy?
Yeah, Adam Gilchrist. Yep. So he's a billionaire because of the F45 gyms. Like he's getting into the alcohol space, obviously, with the team names. But he just is an Australian guy. He has a LLC and wants to get into rugby, and people see the potential of it in the United States. So this is no better way to get in right now than to do this.
And some of those things, like with the team names, that's so gimmickry. He's bringing in all these foreigners, and
very hot topic in the MLR world is the names.
Yeah, and I was listening. He put a game in SoFi Stadium. I mean,
yeah, it's crazy how.
God love him,
right? And that's what people have eventually come to accept is like, I may not like the team's name is the Giltinis and the logo is literally like a martini glass. Like I may not be on board with that, but this rich guy's coming over and he wants rugby to work here and he's doing all this stuff. So you get
it's a perfect team to hate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and they're really good. And they're killing everybody this year. So, John, before you carry on, I'm gonna have to go grab my computer charger really quick. I'm sorry to do this, but my computer's about to die, so I'm gonna go run upstairs and grab that. Is that right?
No problem.
All right,
I'll do a monologue.
Perfect.
And I guess that monologue is rugby podcast, and I've talked a little bit about this. If you want some ideas on what handball should do in this country, what mistakes we might want to avoid, what to do with college rugby, high school rugby. There are so many really interesting podcasts that you can check out to see how a game that is developed. There's 127 times as many people that play rugby as handball. That number is probably actually even higher, I would guess. So they're a model for us to follow. There's no analogy that's perfect, but there is a lot of similarity between how rugby has developed and how handball's developed. They're both team sports. They're team sports that had a expat component. With rugby, it was mostly people from the UK, Australia, South Africa, and you'll see those sorts of people in USA Rugby circles the same way you'll see expats involved with USA Handball. And they brought in that they brought in that knowledge of the game, that love of the game. We need a guy like Adam Gilchrist to buy a professional handball franchise. I don't know if such a guy exists that's willing to spend that level of money in the U.S. There is actually a billionaire handball player, Bob Rich with Rich Foods in Buffalo, played in the Empire State Games. Boy, he'd be somebody, if he wanted to start a franchise, that would be great. He's a little up there on there in years, though. There might be somebody younger who might be the Adam Gilchrist for handball. People have always brought up Mark Cuban and Dirk Nowitzki. Nowitzki's father, by chance, was a professional handball player.
Interesting. Mark Cuban got the rugby ties too. He's played rugby at Indiana, and I know people have already asked him if he would buy an MLR team, and he said no. So,
well, I heard on a podcast that basically hinted that he has helped bail out USA Rugby in the past, but he doesn't want to make that publicly known because a lot of people ask him for money.
Yeah, I can imagine if you got a lot of people ask you for it.
Yeah, but I was just doing a little bit of a monologue on the parallels with rugby, and we talked a little bit about the owners. The Gilchrist guy is a super rich guy, but there are other folks that whether it's a group of multimillionaires getting together to form a team, this would not be happening if those guys didn't exist.
That's true. Yeah. And so I don't know how familiar people are, I guess, with like the history of professional rugby, but like before MLR, there was a thing called the Professional Rugby Organization. It's called Pro Rugby. And it was, I don't know like hardly anything about this, but it didn't work. Like it lasted one season maybe. And I've not heard great things. I heard a lot of people didn't get paid, which obviously is messed up. And that's all I really know about it. I don't know the ins and outs. I know there was like a big lawsuit, all this stuff, but like
I think that lawsuit is still going on. Yeah, I could be wrong.
So but this is like the second iteration of it all. And so they had the chance, honestly, to see what worked, what didn't work. And they saw enough to see that it could work here, right? It could work in the United States. And then the rest, they just had to make
well, that's my next question, because I'm always, when I say I was watching a rugby game, just kind of half, I always look in the stands. How many people, how many butts and seats are they getting into, these stands to watch rugby? And it's always a loaded, I look at the professional lacrosse league and how many people they're getting in there and what they want to charge for tickets. My goodness, they want to charge a lot of money for tickets.
To watch lacrosse or rugby?
For the lacrosse. I don't know what the rugby, I think you guys have a lot more reasonable pricing structure.
It's been fairly affordable as far as I'm concerned. Like I was lucky enough to be credentialed for the first few years, but I have been, going, I did get to see rugby at a lot of different venues now. Like I've been to Utah, I've been to Seattle a couple of times. I was just there as a fan actually. So I'm going to Salt Lake City again next weekend to watch some rugby. So like NOLA, where else have I gone? San Diego. Like I've been to a few different venues, and you're right. This attendance that's something, again, I think MLR does a good job of keeping locked down. They don't want to show all your cards, but it's 1,500, 2,000 people. Like I feel like it's about that. And
but I've seen some matches where there was like nobody there, and that's one of the things. You can keep the finances locked down, but you can't. The camera showing empty seats, and that's why sometimes it's the venue that you're in.
Right.
You want to be in a venue that it looks good, because people don't like to be in an empty arena either.
Yeah, no, and you're right. There has been, of course, there are going to be some matches that are sparsely attended, but Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. It is the venue, and a lot of venues are changing. Teams are moving into a little bit nicer venues. Houston has their own, facility now, their own rugby stadium. Yeah, and then like I guess the others, like I've been to some of those matches I've gone to have been like I went to the MLR final, so obviously that one's going to be more full than just a standard one-off match in April. So
yeah, and so the money's coming in mostly from the investors, and I think you guys have. That when I say you guys, and I realize you don't work for them, I think they've done a good job with obtaining sponsorship. I'm not sure what the TV deal was exactly, but you're on in a lot of places, and they got a nice web stream as well. But a lot of times those TV deals are those leagues paying to be on TV, and I don't know what the MLR status was for that.
And like, again, I think just from outside looking in, as far as I know, that's what's the case for all that too, right? You pay to be on ESPN Plus, you pay to be on some of these channels, just, because it gets you that exposure. And I think MLR's been like clearly open and honest about the fact they're not turning a profit. It would be impossible to turn a profit in 4 years, right? Like you're eventually, you're trying to build this up until you get that big TV deal. And then that's when you start making a profit, and that's when you can start doing different things. And that's when you have some money to throw around is when you get that TV deal. But until you get that, you're just working towards that. That's what I've come to understand in the, 4 years this has existed, and just reading stuff and trying to understand, what the situation is.
Yeah. And everybody always likes to bring up the MLS. They don't like to bring up the XFL, the Arena Football League.
Right.
There are a lot of failed leagues out there.
Yeah, the USFL. I just read a book about that a couple of years ago, and it was some very similar parallels, to be quite honest, to what the MLR was doing. And just the USFL people now have been like, we just expanded way too fast. Like we just added way too many teams way too quickly. And a lot of people have thought that about the MLR too, right? It started with 7 teams, and I think this year was up to 12. It should have been 14 if the Raptors didn't withdraw. And then Dallas had a team that pulled out right before the season started, just from some COVID. They were scared of some COVID stuff, from what I could understand. So, but maybe like on the other hand, that's just like in the natural progression of a league, right? Some people drop out, some people do different things, and
and that's why I look at rugby with over 100 times the size of handball, and the struggles. You making some headway. Maybe this is going to work.
Yeah.
But I just look at like, wow, it's just a bridge too far for us right now. I want to get one good collegiate league.
Yeah. Baby steps.
Working. Yes. That's my take. What about the salaries of the players and the foreign players that have come in? And again, nobody's out there publishing a list of everybody's salary like they do in the NFL. But what's the range of the salaries from like the low end to like the high end? Who's the highest paid rugby player in the U.S.?
That's a great question. I honestly wouldn't even know how to answer that, but I think like there's numbers online where you can see, there's cap that exists. Like each team has to operate under a certain amount of, it's a salary cap. I don't know what it is. I think last year it was like $500,000, like 500K. And then there's agents involved, obviously negotiating deals. But I think if I had to guess, like maybe, Adam Gitto or Adam Ashley Cooper that have come over to play for LA, like maybe they're touching like 80,000 a year. Maybe, I don't know. That's just a random guess off the top of my head. But working down, like I think there's still people on like hourly like contracts. Like you get paid an hourly wage if you are like, somebody trying to break into the sport.
He was a pretty damn good player. He's probably kind of old now though, isn't he?
He's like 38 and he's still ripping it up out here though. So.
I have to watch. Who does he play for?
He plays for LA. They've got a star-studded roster there.
Wow, I'll have to watch. He was like the best player on Australia.
Yeah, that's the guy. He's over here now. This is his first year.
Wow.
So again, those are really rough estimates. I'm not sure. Like I said,
and I'm sure he was making a lot more money in his heyday for whatever pro club he was playing for. And I suppose too, I mean, we talked a little bit, maybe, there's like side benefits that they're being offered in terms of lodging and car, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Mr. Gilchrist has found creative financing for. That's hearsay, but
Allegedly,
I mean,
yes.
maybe he's a sponsor spokesman for F45 workouts, and he turns the lights on or something. But
I'll do a little MLR salary.
Yeah. So, well, that gives me some insight, because I was curious about the MLR, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe we'll have an MLH someday.
Okay, so according to Google, I just typed this in really quick, and obviously this is the first thing that popped up. It says, while MLR salaries are currently well below those of other professional leagues, the salary cap in 2020 was $500,000, and the maximum individual rate was $45K. So that was as of 2020. So who knows what changed? So it could be right around that same, mark.
Yeah, Gito would have to be getting paid more than $45K.
You would think, right?
To move to another country, and but good for him. I mean, maybe it's a little bit like David Beckham. That's
very realistically what MLR is kind of, that's how they're making this work at the beginning, is lure a guy that wants to come play in the United States for a little bit, and I'll try to make some, but and that's where people too, is like, well, that's not what's going to sustain the league. The league's going to be sustainable when you start creating American stars. But the thing with rugby, and I've talked about this before, is like, that's not like the ethos of rugby, right? It's not like a me game. It's a team game. And you can argue that's why the NBA is so successful, is because they have these LeBrons that is not afraid to toot his own horn and do that stuff. And, so that's a whole other conversation, I guess.
Yeah. They've done that a little bit with rugby. I mean,
they're trying for sure.
But like when I was in Europe, I mean, Johnny Wilkinson was getting some pub, and then there's, God, I can't remember. There was the caveman for France. I can't think of his name now, but he had like a big beard and stuff. He kind of looked like a caveman, but there was a little bit of marketing, but not the LeBron and the Lakers versus Chris Paul and the Suns.
Patrick Mahomes, like they're trying to get better about it. And I feel like honestly, the best thing MLR's done is with this rugby network thing is it's like, it's free, right?
Yeah.
You can sign up, you can watch all the games for free. Most of them live. The ones that obviously aren't on cable are live, but even the ones on cable, they put on there eventually. And that's like their social media, that rugby network social media is like, they're doing good jobs of clipping, cool plays, and they're making jokes, and they're putting out a lot of stuff that people want to share. And that's obviously going to help.
And that's what the Champions League is trying to do for handball. They have EHF TV. If you want to go watch handball right now, EHF TV has stored matches with English commentary that you can go watch. The Final Four. I've been to the Final Four in Cologne, with 18,000 fans in the stands, so they can up their game for, like a weekend, and they're trying to do some of the stuff, but you compare what has been done with like the NBA and NFL. And I had a conversation with the HBL, the German Bundesliga guy, several years ago, and he says, we're 50 years behind the NBA. He knows, but just in that time, I've seen, progress, but it's kind of a baby step thing. So,
right.
But wow. Well, this is a great conversation. I'll give you another one pass, and you can then promote your podcast and Denver XOs and whatnot. Any more questions?
I think I got them covered. I'm sure I'll remember one, obviously, when I get off. That's usually how it goes. But no, I really appreciate the time, John. It's been fun chatting with you, talking a little bit about this Colorado XO experiment. If you want to follow along with all the stuff I'm doing, just at Colton Strickler on Twitter. And of course, I'm working for DNVR Rugby and the greater DNVR Sports Network. And for those unfamiliar with that, that's DNVR's media company down here in Denver, doing some big stuff. I've been headlining the rugby coverage here for a year and a half. Follow along at DNVR_rugby. that's a subscription-based website, but all the rugby stuff's free. So if you're interested, you can check all that out for free. And if you like what you see, you can subscribe and, enjoy the Broncos coverage, all the college coverage, all that good stuff. I really appreciate the time, John. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been a blast. I've learned a lot. I'm sure we'll be chatting again. I was looking on the calendar, I guess USA Canada up there in Glendale, September 11th.
I'm actually going to be in New York for that weekend, but there's another. Yes, I'm going to watch the Broncos play the Giants.
Wow.
I've never been before. My friend and I are going to knock out a little bucket list trip, and we're going to go do that. So I'm going to actually miss that one, but a lot of good stuff at Infinity Park, Rugby Town Sevens, obviously. Like you were mentioning, there'll be handball in the Olympics, watch some Rugby Sevens, and then come watch some more Rugby Sevens at Infinity Park third week in August.
Definitely watch some Rugby Sevens. Perry Bacon, Carl Niles, it's fun to watch them work. It's almost unfair.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
So if they get the right situation, they're
going to score.
They're going to score.
You're not going to catch them, I promise you.
Yeah. If you give them a little bit of daylight, they're running around you for a score.
Take a mile.
All right. So remember, you can subscribe to the Team Handball News podcast at the bottom of the page here. It's got the links for RSS feed. It's on several different platforms. Just go ahead and subscribe to it. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a line or contact me on any of our social media platforms. So for Colton Strickler, this has been John Ryan, and thanks for listening.